All right, so we are live. We're going to give it a second so I have everything set up. Thank you for everyone who's joining me. This is Fresh Faces, New Ideas. My name is David. If you like the channel and you like what I do, please like and subscribe, or you can follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. So this is our weekly live stream. For this one, we're going to go over the Joe Biden speech that he had last night. I haven't actually seen it. I'm only seeing some of the responses to it. We're going to cover some of the voter suppression stuff, a little bit of Andrew Cuomo stuff, and then we'll see what else is going on. But that seems to be the plan. We'll see how long it takes to get through the speech. That'll determine a lot of it. It's a shorter speech than I thought it was. It's only about a half hour, so that's not too bad. All right. So once again, for those who are joining us, this is the Fresh Faces New Idea live stream. This is the weekly live stream. Once I get bigger, I hope to do it more. We're going to cover the speech. We're going to cover some Cuomo stuff. We're going to cover Arizona and some of their voter suppression laws, and then some other stuff. So the on the Cuomo stuff, I'm probably going to do another video specifically going into it. A lot of it's still emerging today. A whole bunch of high-ranking New York Democrats, including Jerry Nadler, and then AOC, Jamal Bowman, pretty much all of them except for the senators, and have said that Cuomo should resign. I know there's an investigation open. I believe an impeachment inquiry has been opened. A lot of this I haven't focused on yet because I've been more looking at the COVID bill that just passed. We'll talk about that a little bit. The other bills that are going to pass, which were passed and are now headed to the Senate, which are H.R. 1, which is the Voting Rights and the John Lewis Act, which H.R. 5, which is the Equality Act, H.R. 8 and H.R. 1446 both passed yesterday. Those are the gun control bills, and I think there's a climate change and a infrastructure bill. I know that they're talking about one. I don't think anything has been released about it, but the big one has been that the COVID relief package has passed. So the next couple of weeks, Joe Biden is going to be out with Kamala Harris, and they're going to be pitching this bill to let the American people know what the Democrats did for them. And let's be clear, this is what the Democrats did. Every Republican chose not to vote for it. Some of them chose not to vote for it twice. The House actually voted a second time, and then still no Republicans voted for it. So for any Republican who's out there saying, hey, Americans, you've received all of this because of the act, the caveat, of course, to anybody who's reporting on this has to be, but I didn't want to give it to you. Most recently, there was a senator who said, look, I got all this for small businesses, and the reporter asked him, well, you didn't vote for the act, and he's like, yeah, well, just because there's one small thing that I want, I don't want the rest of it. But the problem with that is you also didn't care enough to fight for that piece because you voted against it. This is very similar to the criticism against Bernie for the crime bill, Joe Biden's crime bill. They're like, well, Bernie, you're criticizing it, but you voted for it. It's like, yeah, I voted for it because of the violence against women part, which still hasn't been reauthorized. That expired a couple of years ago, and that needs to be reauthorized. So when they argue, here's all the good things that you got from it, they did not vote for it. So, and they fought against everything. And the Democrats didn't do everything that they could have for this bill, too. I've said this before, but every part that Joe Manchin had a hand in made the bill objectively worse. There was no looking at the bill and saying, oh, you know what, Joe Manchin, he really helped us get this part over. No, Joe Manchin was part of the reason that the $15 minimum wage wasn't included. Joe Manchin was part of the reason that the unemployment was dropped from 400 to 300. And for people saying, oh, well, you're giving people too much money, they're not going to go back to work. Part of the reason people can't go back to work is there are no jobs at all. Every month we see more. Every week we see jobless claims, and they're in the high 800 plus, 1,000 plus, and that reason is because the economy has crashed. And people say, oh, well, it's because of the lockdowns. Partly, but part of the reason it was done that way is because we did the worst of both worlds. We both didn't lock down hard enough to actually stamp down the virus, and we didn't support the people who did lock down. And that's how we ended up with both a massive spread and a crashed economy. So this bill is the first step to getting things closer, at least on an economic step under Joe Biden. Now, the other caveat is this will be the easiest thing Joe Biden passes, unless they do some increase in military spending, because that always passes. But will be the easiest bill that he has to pass. So yes, while people are going to argue, oh, he didn't reach out to Republicans, that's not accurate, because Republicans didn't want to vote for this. We know for a fact that the monetary difference between having those two Georgia senators and Republican control of the Senate is $1.3 trillion. That was what they offered in response to this, was $600 billion. So we know that their bill was not anywhere near adequate, because even this bill, as good as it is not totally adequate. A lot of people aren't going to be able to make a dent in their bills just from this $1,400. The tax credits and stuff are good, yes. The child poverty stuff is good. It'll help lower child poverty for a year, depending on how long these programs go. So there's good and bad in this bill. We're going to go to Joe Biden's speech now. I haven't seen it, so let's see what he says. All right. Here we go.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Tonight, I'd like to talk to you about where we are as we mark 1 year since everything stopped because of this pandemic. A year ago, we were hit with a virus that was met with silence and spread unchecked. Denials for days, weeks, then months. That led to more deaths, more infections, more stress, and more loneliness.
So this has been one of the criticisms that I've seen. This was one of the things that was fact-checked by CNN, and I say fact-checked in quotes because some of the things that they fact-checked were just so blatantly nitpicky, because there wasn't a lot apparently in this. So yes, Donald Trump did acknowledge the virus, but he absolutely downplayed it for a very long time. 15 cases, there'll soon be 0. He actively said, I don't want to get the people off the boat because it will cause more spread. He pushed hydrochloroquine. He was very against masks. There's a lot of things that they did that made it worse. So yes, would silence have ultimately been better? Who knows? But they weren't silent, but they weren't actively helping.
Photos and videos from 2019 feel like they were taken in another era. The last vacation, the last birthday with friends, the last holiday with extended family. While it was different for everyone, we all lost something. A collective suffering, a collective sacrifice. A year filled with the loss of life and the loss of living for all of us.
So the other thing about what he's saying right now is that this is the first time we've really had someone say that it's collective for like a collective acknowledgement that we all went through this together. When Donald Trump was president, it was very much red versus blue. But we've all gone through this. To this comment, he couldn't get through the first sentence without stumbling. The man speaks weird. He stumbles over his words sometimes. Especially when you're reading a teleprompter. I don't read great off a teleprompter. I don't read great off my laptop when I'm reading things in front of you. So you know what? I forgive him for that.
But in the loss, we saw how much there was to gain in appreciation, respect, and gratitude.
Right. Hold on. I'm gonna flip back during the ad.
Elite group.
Right. Okay. All right, we're back. Hopefully there won't be more.
Finding light in the darkness is a very American thing to do. In fact, it may be the most American thing we do. And that's what we've done. We've seen frontline and essential workers risking their lives, sometimes losing them, to save and help others. Researchers and scientists racing for a vaccine. And so many of you, as Hemingway wrote, being strong in all the broken places. I know it's been hard. I truly know. As I've told you before, I carry a card in my pocket with the number of Americans who have died from COVID to date. It's on the back of my schedule. As of now, total deaths in America, 527,726. That's more deaths than in World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, and 9/11 combined.
Okay, so the other point I want to make about this was one of the CNN fact checks, was that they said that he's not accurate because he didn't put in both non-battle combatives and everyone else who died in it. That's not what he's referring to here. Obviously, he's referring to American deaths, and even if that's not enough of an accuracy for CNN, this is the second largest mass casualty event in American history. The only one larger is the upper echelons of what the projections were for the Civil War. So depending on how bad things get before, if a new variant comes in or there's new there's a spike because of how things are reopening, we could very well see over 600,000 deaths.
There were husbands, wives, sons and daughters, grandparents, friends, neighbors, young and old. They leave behind loved ones, unable to truly grieve or to heal, even to have a funeral. But I'm also thinking about everyone else who lost this past year to natural causes, by cruel fate of accident or other disease. They too died alone. They too leave behind loved ones who are hurting badly. You've often heard me say before, I talk about the longest walk any parent can make is up a short flight of stairs to his child's bedroom to say, I'm sorry, I lost my job. Can't be here anymore. Like my dad told me when he lost his job in Scranton. So many of you have had to make that same walk this past year. You lost your job. You closed your business. Facing eviction, homelessness, hunger, a loss of control, maybe worst of all, a loss of hope. Watching a generation of children who may be set back up to a year or more because they've not been in school.
Okay, so before this ad pops up, I'm going to just play this and I'm going to talk over it. One of the things, that's good about Joe Biden is he's talking about, the people who've lost stuff. And it's good to recognize that there was a huge impact on just the world because of this. But the other thing is, he also had the argument against him is also, you shut down the schools. Why won't you open the schools to get them back? He's advocated for having, teachers be vaccinated, things like that. A lot of the problem with the schools not being open is simply because the schools themselves aren't able to accommodate people in the way that they need to be safe. You can't physically distance these kids because the schools, unless you're making the schools bigger, you have to make them, there's not room to have 30, 40 kids in a classroom and space them far enough and for the teachers to be able to walk around, or there's not enough space for different classes to do that. Or if you take over other classes, then how are certain specialties going to exist? How are you supposed to do recess and things like this? It's a lot more complicated than just open up. So he is doing a good job there.
It's the details of life that matter the most. And we miss those details. The big details and the small moments. Weddings, birthdays, graduations. All the things that needed to happen, but didn't. The first date, the family reunions, the Sunday night rituals. It's all has exacted a terrible cost on the psyche of so many of us. For we are fundamentally a people who want to be with others, to talk, to laugh, to hug, to hold one another. But this virus has kept us apart. Grandparents haven't seen their children or grandchildren. Parents haven't seen their kids. Kids haven't seen their friends. The things we used to do that always filled us with joy have become things we couldn't do and broke our hearts. Too often, we've turned against one another. A mask, the easiest thing to do to save lives. Sometimes it divides us. States pitted against one another instead of working with each other. Vicious hate crimes against Asian Americans who've been attacked, harassed, blamed, and scapegoated. At this very moment, so many of them are fellow Americans. They're on the front lines of this pandemic trying to save lives. And still, they're forced to live in fear for their lives just walking down streets in America. It's wrong, it's un-American, and it must stop. Look,
There's no arguing with what he just said. We've made masks a political talking point. When there's the data is there. There's a reason there have been less flu deaths this year is because of people, social distancing and wearing the mask. There's the hate crimes have absolutely gone up, and I can't imagine that didn't have anything to do with the former president calling the coronavirus the China virus or Kung flu or whatever racial stuff he was using to say it. There are things that we did that didn't have to be done and are uniquely American, and they're not good things.
we know what we need to do to beat this virus. Tell the truth. Follow the scientists and the science. Work together. Put trust and faith in our government to fulfill its most important function, which is protecting the American people. No function more important. We need to remember the government isn't some foreign force in a distant capital. No, it's us, all of us. We, the people. For you and I, that America thrives when we give our hearts, when we turn our hands to common purpose. And right now, my friends, we're doing just that. And I have to say, as your president, I'm grateful to you. Last summer, I was in Philadelphia and I met a small business owner, a woman. I asked her, I said, what do you need most? Never forget what she said to me. She said, looking me in the eye, she said, I just want the truth. The truth. Just tell me the truth.
Okay, so there's going to be another ad. So the thing with this is, like, look, it's anecdotal because, obviously it's anecdotal. That's how politicians talk. But he's saying the right things here. I think this is a very good speech. Maybe he stumbled the first sentence, but he's been pretty good so far. I mean, look, reading off teleprompters and stuff, not everyone can do it. It's not like the easiest thing to read off. You think it is, but it's, he's doing fine for this one.
Think of that. My fellow Americans, you're owed nothing less than the truth. And for all of you asking when things will get back to normal, here is the truth. The only way to get our lives back, to get our economy back on track, is to beat the virus. You've been hearing me say that for while I was running and the last 50 days I've been president. But this is one of the most complex operations we've ever undertaken as a nation in a long time. That's why I'm using every power I have as President of the United States to put us on a war footing to get the job done. Sounds like hyperbole, but I mean it, a war footing. And thank God we're making some real progress now.
So there's two things here. One, he is right. This has been repeated ad nauseum. You can't just fix everything by opening up. Just because a state opens up doesn't mean people are just going to go back to work. One, because the jobs aren't there. Two, because people don't feel safe. There will be some section that has to go back to work, or there will be some section that feels like they're fine and they're just going to go out. But that's not how you're going to fix all the issues. You have to instill the people with the confidence that this thing is gone and that they can go back to normal life. And that's part of what beating the virus is. That's why the vaccine rollout is so important. It's about to go. I assume he's about to go talk to that because that's what it seems to be leading up to.
In my first full day in office, I outlined for you a comprehensive strategy to beat this pandemic. We've spent every day since attempting to carry it out. 2 months ago, this country didn't have nearly enough vaccine supply to vaccinate all or ever near all of the American public. But soon we will. We've been working with vaccine manufacturers, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, to manufacture and purchase hundreds of millions of doses of these 3 safe, effective vaccines. And now, at the direction and with the assistance of my administration, Johnson & Johnson is working together with a competitor, Merck, to speed up and increase the capacity to manufacture new Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is 1 shot.
So this is like, look, that's good that they're pushing out the vaccine. It's variable about how much actual doses we had prior to Joe Biden coming in. The real issue truly is going to be what happens next after America and all these other wealthier nations get vaccinated. Because the longer it takes, because the problem with this virus is how fast it's mutated. We have at least 3 mutations, is my understanding, in the U.S. We don't know if there's going to be any more, and it varies based on how effective each vaccine is going to be to each variant. So the problem with this virus is if you're gatekeeping the vaccine from these poor nations that can't afford to pay for it, or they don't have the infrastructure, then you're going to create new variants, and there's no reason that this thing can't explode recently. We're going to have to do massive booster shots and constantly be, fighting something like this. Once there has to be a universal effort together with the whole planet to make sure that everyone can get vaccinated so that we can have and totally wipe out this disease. It's similar to how we did things with like polio. Unfortunately, things like smallpox have come back. They came back in France. This is the problem with the anti-vaxxers, but it's also a problem with these companies using this for a profit. Yes, obviously they're going to try to profit, but this puts a damper on the ability to truly stop this virus.
In fact, just yesterday, I announced, and I met with the CEOs of both companies, I announced our plan to buy an additional 100 million doses of Johnson & Johnson vaccines. These 2 companies, competitors, have come together for the good of the nation, and they should be applauded for it. It's truly a national effort, just like we saw during World War II. Now, because of all the work we've done, we'll have enough vaccine supply for all adults in America by the end of May. That's months ahead of schedule. And we're mobilizing thousands of vaccinators to put the vaccine in one's arm.
So this is another point that we could have gotten to faster. So part of the problem with our testing originally was we didn't create mass mobile testing sites or just mass testing sites. This is similar to what happened in South Korea, where they had these massive testing sites and they were able to test thousands and thousands of people rapidly. Because we didn't have this type of infrastructure, we're now trying to figure out a different way to get the vaccines. We're playing catch up here. If we had, mass testing in all of these places, we could just turn them over into vaccination sites and it would be much easier to get it to places.
Calling active duty military, FEMA, retired doctors and nurses, administrators, and those to administer the shots. And we've been creating more places to get the shots. We've made it possible for you to get a vaccine at nearly any one of 10,000 pharmacies across the country, just like you get your flu shot. We're also working with governors and mayors in red states and blue states to set up and support nearly 600 federally supported vaccination centers that administers hundreds of thousands of shots per day.
So there's 2 things here. One, the argument is going to be, oh, well, a lot of what he's doing was built off of what Trump did, except Trump didn't have a plan. His plan was literally, here you go, states, figure it out. You need to have the federal government to help coordinate this so it's more efficient and more effective. The other thing with the mass vaccination sites, we've already seen people try to shut them down. The one in the Dodger Stadium was shut down by people just protesting in front of it, which still makes no sense to me. I don't understand with this idea that you're going to have a microchip planted in you that they're going to track you. You do understand that they can track all this stuff from your phone, right? That and Google, and they all collect all your data anyway. So the fact that you're afraid of this microchip is so dumb.
You can drive up to a stadium or a large parking lot, get your shot, never leave your car, and drive home in less than an hour. We've been sending vaccines to hundreds of community health centers all across America, located in underserved areas. And we've been deploying, and we will deploy more mobile vehicles and pop-up clinics to meet you where you live, so those who are least able to get the vaccine are able to get it.
So this is the other thing that was that's like not really talked about enough. So as it stands currently, even the best of times in America, we have food deserts where it's just incredibly difficult for people to find enough food to live. So of course we're going to end up with these vaccine deserts. So having these pop-up clinics are good for a number of reasons. One, they're going to be people who are housebound and not able to get the vaccine anyway. So we have to be able to vaccinate them. And also having the mobile clinics means you can reach out to these towns and areas that have less infrastructure in order to, have like a vaccine setup place. Further, that you can use these mobile pop-up areas to figure out what places need more investment into infrastructure, whether it's getting Wi-Fi, whether it's expanding for medical reasons, whether it's expanding for food reasons, because we have the resources to feed everybody. We just don't because of greed. And we have, so this can ultimately lead to a lot better things for America, because we'll have the ability to understand the map better and understand where the true problems are, the areas that really don't have enough.
We continue to work on making at-home testing available. And we've been focused on serving people in the hardest hit communities of this pandemic: Black, Latino, Native American, and rural communities. So what does all this add up to? When I took office 50 days ago, only 8% of Americans, after months, only 8% of those over the age of 65 had gotten their first vaccination. Today, that number is 65%. Just 14% of Americans over the age of 75 50 days ago had gotten their first shot. Today, that number is well over 70%. With new guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, that came out on Monday, it means simply this: millions and millions of grandparents who went months without being able to hug their grandkids can now do so.
So two things to this. One, the statistics he cited about the 8% and the 65% are kind of misleading anyway based on the fact checks. So it's true that 8% didn't receive it, but they hadn't had months to do it. Donald Trump basically had about a month to roll out the vaccines by the time they were cleared, although he said he would have 20 million shots out. That didn't happen. The 65%, I think it's closer to 62.5 is my understanding from what I've been reading, but those are like nitpicky details. There. So we're going to continue there.
More people are fully vaccinated. The CD will continue to provide additional...
the other thing is, we're going to go over the CDC guidelines, just to talk about them, because there have been complaints about that as well.
Guidance on what you can do in the workplace, places of worship with your friends, as well as travel.
All right, hold on.
That face that is you.
When I came into office, you may recall, I set a goal that many of you said was kind of way over the top. I said I intended to get 100 million shots in people's arms in my first 100 days in office. Tonight, I can say we're not only going to meet that goal, we're going to beat that goal, because we've actually on track to reach this goal of 100 million shots in arms on my 60th day in office.
I think that's like 10 days from now. So that would make it what, like the 20th, like by the end of the month. He said apparently he expects to do this. I hadn't heard him say that before, but that would be pretty incredible.
Other country in the world has done this. None. Now, I want to talk about the next steps we're thinking about. First, tonight, I'm announcing that I will direct all states, tribes, and territories to make all adults, people 18 and over, eligible to be vaccinated no later than May 1. Let me say that again. All adult Americans will be eligible to get a vaccine no later than May 1. That's much earlier than expected. Let me be clear. That doesn't mean everyone's going to have that shot immediately, but it means you'll be able to get in line beginning May 1. Every adult will be eligible to get their shot. And to do this, we're going to go from 1 million shots a day that I promised in December, before I was sworn in, to beating our current pace of 2 million shots a day, outpacing the rest of the world.
So there's a lot there. Yes, having more people eligible would solve a lot of the problems, because one of the big problems is people don't know where to go or don't know how to sign up. So having more people eligible would be good. They do need to figure out some type of, each state or the federal government itself has to figure out some type of centralized way to do this. I think he says it in this video, or it came out after, that they're going to put somebody in charge of creating some type of website in order to aggregate all the data and figure out how to oversee all of that, which is the big issue, is you got to be able to oversee all of this. So let's see what's going on.
Secondly, at the time when every adult is eligible in May, we will launch, with our partners, new tools to make it easier for you to find the vaccine and where to get the shot, including a new website that will help you first find the place to get vaccinated and the one nearest you. No more searching day and night for an appointment for you and your loved ones. Thirdly, with the passage of the American Rescue Plan, and I thank again the House and Senate for passing it, and my announcement last month of a plan to vaccinate teachers and school staff, including bus drivers, we can accelerate massive nationwide effort to reopen our schools safely and meet my goal that I stated at the same time, about 100 million shots, of opening a majority of K through 8 schools in my first 100 days in office. This is going to be the #1 priority of my new Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. Fourth, in the coming weeks, we will issue further guidance on what you can and cannot do once fully vaccinated.
So here's the other thing that people complained about a lot, because I know he's going to say something further that caused a lot of heartbreak, is this phrasing of can and cannot do. So they're guidelines, but they're designed to make sure that you follow them in order to keep people healthy. So while it says can and cannot do, and everyone's like, oh, well, we're American, we can and can not do whatever we want. Yeah, but there's certain things you can and should do to make sure that we can get out of this sooner. So if you're just saying, oh, well, you don't tell me what to do, I'm going to do whatever I want, you're an ass, and you're making this worse.
To lessen the confusion, to keep people safe, and encourage more people to get vaccinated. And finally, fifth, and maybe most importantly, I promise I will do everything in my power. I will not relent until we beat this virus. But I need you, the American people. I need you. I need every American to do their part. And that's not hyperbole. I need you. I need you to get vaccinated when it's your turn and when you can find an opportunity. And to help your family, your friends, your neighbors get vaccinated as well. Because here's the point. If we do all this, if we do our part, if we do this together, by July the 4th, there's a good chance you, your families and friends will be able to get together in your backyard or in your neighborhood and have a cookout or a barbecue and celebrate Independence Day.
So this is the line that garnered a lot of, anger from people. Say, how dare you tell me when or when I cannot celebrate July 4th? I'm an American. I'm going to celebrate however I want. That's not what he said. He said, if we do this, you're not going to have to worry. We can go back to doing this. This is the same argument that they had with Thanksgiving. This is the same argument they had with Christmas. They're trying to cancel it, and they're trying to say that you can't do it. The whole point of what he's saying now is that we can work together to defeat this thing and then go back to normal. That's what he's putting out as July 4th the goal. Could you imagine if we're like mostly done with this by July 4th, the difference that July 4th is going to mean to all the American people? Do you know how, like, that's literally it's like the Independence Day movies where, just because it's Independence Day here doesn't mean it doesn't have further reaching. But if you do it, if you nail things to holidays, it makes them even better. So he's not saying you can't celebrate July 4th without, their blessing, but they're saying, just do this for a couple more months and then we don't have to worry. It's really not that difficult.
That doesn't mean large events with lots of people together, but it does mean small groups will be able to get together. After this long, hard year, that will make this Independence Day something truly special, where we not only mark our independence as a nation, but we begin to mark our independence from this virus.
One second.
But to get there, we can't let our guard down. This fight is far from over. As I told the woman in Pennsylvania, I'll tell you the truth. A July 4th with your loved ones is the goal. But a lot can happen. Conditions can change. The scientists have made clear that things may get worse again as new variants of the virus spread. We've got work to do to ensure that everyone has confidence in the safety and effectiveness of all three vaccines. So my message to you is this: listen to Dr. Fauci, one of the most distinguished and trusted voices in the world. He's assured us the vaccines are safe. They underwent rigorous scientific review. I know they're safe. Vice President Harris and I know they're safe. That's why we got the vaccine publicly in front of cameras, so for the world to see, so you could see us do it.
So this is one of the other things that came out recently was they did a mass vaccination commercial, and it had every single living president and their wives, with the exception of Donald Trump. Now, I don't know how Donald Trump didn't get involved in this. My guess is he didn't want to. But that goes a long way, and it would have gone a long way had he chose to help to making this easier to vaccinate. But it goes a long way that a lot of the other living presidents chose to do this.
The First Lady and the Second Gentleman also got vaccinated. Talk to your family, friends, your neighbors, the people you know best who've gotten the vaccine. We need everyone to get vaccinated. We need everyone to keep washing their hands, stay socially distanced, and keep wearing the mask as recommended by the CDC. Because even if we devote every resource we have, beating this virus and getting back to normal depends on national unity. And national unity isn't just how politics and politicians vote in Washington, or what the loudest voices say on cable or online. Unity is what we do together as fellow Americans. Because if we don't stay vigilant and the conditions change, then we may have to reinstate restrictions to get back on track. And please, we don't want to do that again. We've made so much progress. This is not the time to let up. Just as we were emerging from a dark winter into a hopeful spring and summer is not the time to not stick with the rules. I'll close with this. We've lost so much over the last year. We've lost family and friends. We've lost businesses and dreams we spent years building. We've lost time with each other. And our children have lost so much time with their friends, time with their schools. No graduation ceremonies this spring. No graduations from college, high school, moving up ceremonies. You know, and there's something else we lost. We lost faith in whether our government and our democracy can deliver on really hard things for the American people. But as I stand here tonight, we're proving once again something I've said time and time again to the probably tired of hearing me say it. I say it to foreign leaders and domestic alike. It's never, ever a good bet to bet against the American people. America is coming back. The development, manufacture, and distribution of vaccines in record time is a true miracle of science. It's one of the most extraordinary achievements any country has ever accomplished. And we also just saw the Perseverance rover land on Mars. Stunning images of our dreams that are now a reality. Another example of the extraordinary American ingenuity, commitment, and belief in science and one another. And today, I signed into law the American Rescue Plan, an historic piece of legislation that delivers immediate relief to millions of people. Includes $1,400 in direct rescue checks, payments. That means a typical family of four earning about $110,000 will get checks for $5,600 deposited if they have direct deposit or in a check, a treasury check. It extends unemployment benefits. It helps small businesses. It lowers health care premiums for many. It provides food and nutrition, keeps families in their homes, and it will cut child poverty in this country in half.
So there's a lot that he said there that's good. I've talked extensively about the American Rescue Plan. I haven't talked specifically about the Medicare part because it's really not a great way to have done it. I've already spoken about my thoughts. I believe we need to move to a Medicare for all system. The way we're currently doing it is through subsidizing COBRA, which is not the most efficient way to do it. But there are a lot of good things in this bill, and I really hope they harp on it enough. And I hope when they're talking about this, they remind the American people that this bill had 75% approval rating among both Democrats and Republicans. And every single Republican member in the House and Senate said no. Every single one.
And it funds all the steps I've just described to beat the virus and create millions of jobs. In the coming weeks and months, I'll be traveling along with the First Lady, the Vice President, the Second Gentleman, members of my cabinet, to speak directly to you, to tell you the truth about how the American Rescue Plan meets the moment. And if it fails at any pace, I will acknowledge that it failed, but it will not. About how after long, dark years, one whole year, there is hope and light of better days ahead. If we all do our part, this country will be vaccinated soon. Our economy will be on the mend. Our kids will be back in school. And we'll have proven once again that this country can do anything, hard things, big things, important things. Over a year ago, no one could have imagined what we were about to go through. But now, we're coming through it. And it's a shared experience that binds us together as a nation. We are bound together by the loss and the pain of the days that have gone by. We're also bound together by the hope and the possibilities of the days in front of us. My fervent prayer for our country is that after all we've been through, we'll come together as one people, one nation, one America. I believe we can and we will. We're seizing this moment. And history, I believe, will record. We faced and overcame one of the toughest and darkest periods in this nation's history. Darkest we've ever known. I promise you, we'll come out stronger with a renewed faith in ourselves a renewed commitment to one another, to our communities, and to our country. This is the United States of America. And there's nothing, from the bottom of my heart I believe this, there's nothing we can't do when we do it together. So God bless you all. And please, God, give solace to all those people who lost someone. And may God protect our troops.
Okay, so that was a good speech. I think he did a really good job. He showed infinitely more empathy than Donald Trump did. He laid out a plan. And look, a lot of this is really going to depend on Americans. There's only so much that the federal government can do. If you're going to ignore social distancing, if you're not going to wear masks, if you're not going to get vaccinated, you're going to make things worse. It is as simple as that. It is not disputable. You are one of the problem. We're almost there. It is, and when we say almost there, we're almost to the point where things won't be as bad as they are now. Do I think that we're ultimately going to stamp this out? It's varied. It may ultimately, end up like something similar to the flu, where it's like where we have an acceptable level of death where every season it's like 80 to 90 people die a day, which is vastly different than the 1,500. I believe we're still at 1,500 deaths. So we are. I haven't seen the numbers recently. But look, that was a good speech. He went through it. He didn't call anybody names. He didn't attack Republicans. I will attack Republicans because they made the wrong decision by not helping Americans with this vote. He did a good job, just laying it out. He showed the empathy. He said, "Look, here's the hope. The hope is for July 4th." He did not say now you can celebrate it. He didn't say you couldn't celebrate. He said the hope is that we can have an actual celebration because we've gotten through this and there's not a fear of having to go back into a lockdown. This is what happened every other holiday that since things have started, is every time there's a holiday, there's a group of people saying, "Oh, you know what? They don't have any right to tell you what to do. Just do what you want. And if you're an adult, you can make the decisions." Look, there's a reason we have rules. There's a reason we have warning labels. This is a warning label. Just wait a few more weeks. We're getting closer. The vaccines are coming. Social distance, wear a mask, and things will get better. And we will be out of this hopefully sooner than later. But the longer you ignore these things and the longer you just do whatever you want and pretend that you're fine, and this is going to come to a point. There's going to be a point where people are going to lie about being vaccinated to go back to normal. You are also part of the problem. The longer you do that, the more that happens, the more likely we end up with a new variant. And the more variants there are, the less likely that the vaccines are going to work. And that is a problem. The less likely the vaccines will work, the worse things are going to get. It's as simple as that. Just wear a mask, get vaccinated. So on to that, let's look at what the CDC said. So the CDC rolled this out, I think it was Monday. When they first rolled this out, what they said was these are our initial guidelines. We're just going to discuss, this is the first wave and we're going to update it as things go. Granted, there was things that weren't said. They would say, "Oh, why didn't you talk about travel? Why didn't you talk about this?" This is the first update. So as things go, they'll change these guidelines. They'll open them up more. Now, these are guidelines. People are going to argue, "Oh, the CDC is wrong about things." Look, they are occasionally, but this is pretty standard. So what changed? If you're fully vaccinated, you can gather indoors with fully vaccinated people without wearing a mask. Makes sense, right? You're all vaccinated. You're all fine. You can do, fully vaccinated people. You want to go party, go party. You can gather indoors with unvaccinated people from one other household. So if you're at relatives who live together, but you haven't all gotten vaccinated, unless those people are at risk of severe illness. So if you, if you're near grandma and you don't live with her, one of you is vaccinated and the other one of you isn't, you should still be careful. But if you are inside with a relative who is not immunocompromised or isn't at risk of this virus and only one of you is vaccinated, you should still be wearing a mask. If you've been around someone who has COVID-19, you do not need to stay with others or get tested unless you have symptoms. However, if you live in a group setting like a correctional detention facility or group home and around someone who has COVID-19, you should. Okay, so here's what it says. If you are vaccinated, you only need to get tested or quarantined if you have symptoms, which is good, because the biggest problem is the asymptomatic spread. So if you are vaccinated, this eliminates the asymptomatic spread. The problem with some of these things like correctional facilities, detentions, or group homes is whether they have the actual space to house people separately like that. So that's one of the things. So if you're all vaccinated, you can be fine. You can go party, whatever you want. If you're with unvaccinated people who you don't live with, you should still be wearing a mask, especially if they are immunocompromised. So let's see what hasn't changed. For now, if you're fully vaccinated, you should still take steps to protect yourselves from other situations, like wearing a mask, staying 6 feet apart from others, avoiding crowds, and poorly ventilated spaces. Take these precautions whenever you are in public, gatherings with unvaccinated people from more than one household, visiting with an unvaccinated person's increased risk of illness or death, or who lives with a person at increased risk. So this makes sense. You don't know who's still unvaccinated outside. Wearing the mask, staying apart will still help. Not being poorly ventilated space helps. Avoid medium and large-sized gatherings. I think that varies by the state what the actual sizes, but large-sized gatherings are, pretty standard. You can know them. You should delay domestic and international travel. Look at the CDC, because depending on where you are, depends on how bad the virus is. If you're going to somewhere like South Dakota, or if you're going to somewhere like Texas, or somewhere that has a high population that's not being vaccinated, or has removed all their mask restrictions prior to being cleared to do so, those are places that you should probably have to quarantine before you go to. You should still watch out for symptoms if you get them. If you have the symptoms, get tested, stay home, and then whatever your workplace says is guidance that you need to find. So we're still learning about COVID-19. That's good. Look, so overall, this is pretty simple. Just follow these instructions. It's not against your freedom to say, okay, these people know what's working. We're closing in on the bend. If we hit, this has happened every time things have gotten a little better. We've said, okay, well, now we don't need to be restricted for anything else. And they go right into going back to normal, and then it just gets infinitely worse. So just follow the guidelines, and let's beat this. We're almost there. So we're going to move from COVID to something that's a little more entertaining. This has happened on C-SPAN at least once. So I want to actually point this out. For those of you who don't know, this is Bondaire Jones. Bondaire Jones is the representative from the 17th District of New York. Okay? He's the first openly gay African-American man to serve in Congress. This is Jamal Bowman. Jamal Bowman is the Congressional District 16. He beat Elliot Engel. These are not the same people. So C-SPAN and other things who say that they are, they're just not. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So let's quickly turn to voter suppression. So one of the things that I've talked about a lot is H.R. 1. And with the passage of the American Rescue Plan, it moves on to other legislation. And like I've said, there's been a whole bunch of legislation passed. I'm not sure what the first thing that's going to be picked up is. To me, the most important one is H.R. 1 because that deals with the elections. As I've mentioned multiple times before, since the end of the election, there have been somewhere between 165 and 205 bills to curb the ability for people to vote or restricts their voting rights. Most recently in Georgia, they just passed a law that said if you hand out food or water to somebody on a voting line, that's now a felony, which makes no sense. I don't understand how, if their goal is to stop voter fraud, which is what they keep using when they say things like this, is that how does giving someone food or water when they're waiting on a line, which we saw during the elections can last somewhere between 8 to 12 hours, how does that stop voter fraud? The answer is it doesn't. The goal is to not make people vote, because if you realize, I have to stand in line for 8+ hours without food or water, or if someone gives it to me, well, now I'm less likely to vote. And that's the point. We recently just saw I believe it was an Arizona representative saying that Democrats want everyone to vote, but they don't care about fraud. And Republicans care, so they're okay with with more rampant fraud. And the Republicans are more worried about fraud, so they're okay with less people voting. And that the whole point of this is we want the quality of votes because everyone shouldn't have the right to vote. This is wrong on both counts. One, because you can have elections with lots of people voting without voter fraud. It just happened. The voter fraud claims exist. There are claims that exist. The proof is very different. There's been about 1,000 cases of voter fraud in the last 50 years. Period. The most recent ones have generally come from Republicans. The largest case was in North Carolina 9th District, where they had a Republican staffer who was stealing votes and changing them. So a lot of these bills are a solution looking for a problem. There is no overwhelming evidence to prove that voter fraud either changed the election or exists in any significant way that would require these type of bills. The argument always comes down to, oh, well, why can't you show your ID? It's different because you make it a specific ID and then you put a whole bunch of hurdles in between you and getting that ID. If you wanted to do voter IDs, then you tie it to some type of federal license or your driver's ID, and it can't just be your driver's ID because lots of Americans, I think it's like a third of Americans, don't actually have access to a driver's ID because either they don't need one or they've lost some of the information in order to get one, or they just don't have one. So if you create a roadblock and then you create roadblocks that roadblock, you make it more difficult for people to vote. So if you want to argue that you're going to do voter ID, you make it a national thing, and you tie it to automatic voter registration. So as soon as someone turns 18, they get sent a voter card. And I don't see anything wrong with that, if that is your argument. But if your argument is, here's how you do a voter ID, you need to show this type of identification, you need it to be triple checked in duplicate, you need to have you need to go to this place. You need to go to a DMV to look at it. And we're going to close all the DMVs within a 6-mile radius of you, or a 60-mile radius of you. So it takes you 4 hours to go get it. If you're creating these roadblocks, then you're not trying to protect the election. You're trying to put roadblocks in the way of people voting. So the reason this particular article that I'm going to show you is this is Arizona. Arizona is putting one of the most undemocratic laws that I've ever seen. So what this says is that, in particular, HB 227 states that the legislator may revoke the Secretary of State's insurance or certification of a presidential elector's certification of election. So what it says is that, hold on. They have the power to revoke the certification of election as long as they're in the majority. So in this way, it doesn't matter what your vote is, as long as my party is in power. Let's say I'm a Republican in this case, and Donald Trump lost Arizona, like he did. We can overturn that election any day prior to inauguration. There's a lot of problems with that. One of the problems being that the votes are certified 2 weeks before the so that the American people have time to know who the president is, and the incoming new president, if they're, from the transfer of power, has time to start setting up their government. They can start talking to aides in the previous administration to get all the information that they need in order to see, okay, what is going on where are we on a military, where are we on any, potential threats, where are we, in this case, in a pandemic, what is our readiness for things, and they can start prepping for that. So there is no reason for you to be able to overturn an election result based on this. It's just undemocratic in its face. So we're also going to go very quickly into Cuomo. So this is the sixth accuser. I did not realize we were at this many at this point. Like I said earlier, most of the New York State representatives, I think it's other than Gillibrand and Schumer at this point, have said that he needs to resign. I know there's a impeachment investigation currently ongoing, and there's investigations going on to this. So this sixth accuser is unnamed, and she said he groped her. And then she also said that she, hold on, where is it exactly? The insider reports that the woman disclosed the incident in an internal complaint to her supervisor, and that complaint has been referred to the New York Attorney General, Tisha James' office. So she's the one who's actually investigating, is the New York AG. So this this is the difference. If we have a trail, and I've said this over and over again, as long as there's an investigation and the investigation finds something wrong, he should resign. For this specifically, should he also resign for his cover-up of the nursing home deaths? Yes. However, let's be very clear about things. This is not about a whataboutism. This is a true holding true to the standard. If we are holding Cuomo to the standard that he lied about this, people died, and he should resign, we also need to do the same thing for Ron DeSantis and Nomi Kantz and Greg Abbott and any other governor who lied to the American people and ultimately got more people killed. We know for a fact that Ron DeSantis fired the woman in charge of creating their system to track who has COVID data because he wanted her to lie. We also know that he had her arrested. We have it on tape that he had her arrested, in part because she wouldn't lie to him, and she also still had access to the data in itself. So, yes, should Cuomo face some type of consequences for either of these things? Absolutely. But we also have to know there are other governors who have to face consequences for the same thing. So you can't, on one side, say, okay, well, this governor is fine, but this one is bad for doing something similar. And there's the same thing with Republicans now saying, oh, look at all these sexual harassment incidents. They're all terrible. When they ignored Donald Trump, who had 23? I think it was 23 different reports against him. When they ignored Roy Moore, who was a credibly accused child molester. When they ignored the Blasey Ford information with Kavanaugh. I'm not arguing all of them were accurate, but the Blasey Ford one seemed very credible. So, look, I will dig into the Cuomo stuff sometime next week because I haven't ultimately followed it because I was looking mostly at the legislation that was coming through and the American Rescue Plan because that was the big one. So I will look into the Cuomo stuff. And to be clear, this is not because I know Fox News is reporting that they're ignoring it. I think that's funny from Fox News, seeing that over the last week they spent 4+ hours talking about Dr. Seuss and 20 minutes on the COVID relief bill. So, look, there's always going to be bias on some of these things. I'm going to try to get as much information so I can speak about it credibly. And that's where I stand for that. So, here, I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like my content, please like and subscribe. Please follow me at Twitter @FacesIdeas. And I'll be back with a live stream next week. And I will be back with videos